You've just finished your last cancer treatment. The relief is electric. You've endured the side effects, the fear, the uncertainty for weeks, months, maybe longer. Your physicians and nurses clap. Friends and family send congratulatory texts. Someone takes a photo. Maybe you ring a bell. You and everyone are rightfully celebrating. You've made it. But then maybe on the way home, something feels off. Your body still aches, your skin may be screaming, your energy is in the toilet, and your sleep is wrecked. And somewhere along the way, you whisper to yourself, I don't think I feel done. And that's because maybe, just maybe, you're not. Because one of the most overlooked and misunderstood phases of cancer care begins after treatment ends. The transition from active treatment into survivorship. This is the phase that almost always feels harder than people expect. And even if someone tried to warn you about it, few people actually feel prepared. Survivorship isn't a title, it's a transition. And for many, it can be a long and confusing one. What most people don't realize, including those around you, is this. The day treatment ends, the moment everyone else thinks cancer is over, is not the finish line. Because the truth is, cancer treatment may end on a specific day, but healing rarely does. This is the finish line myth. Let's talk about it. This is the After Cancer Podcast. I'm your host, oncology physical therapist, Dr. Leslie Balke. For more than 3 decades, I've walked alongside people living with and beyond cancer. Whether you are a survivor, a caregiver, or part of a clinical team who cares for them, I'm glad you're here. Because life after a cancer diagnosis can feel uncharted and confusing, even when you have a great medical team. In this podcast, evidence, empathy, and the real human experience come together to help you navigate the physical, emotional, and practical realities of cancer and the life that comes after. This is the After Cancer Podcast, rooted in medicine, spoken in human. Welcome to episode 2, The Finish Line Myth, Why Survivorship Feels Harder Than You Expected. During treatment, there's a rhythm, a plan. A team is always watching, measuring, and guiding. Even if you hated the waiting rooms, the copays, and the needles, at least you knew what came next. You were held, you were surrounded, you were guided. There was a purpose and there was a plan. Then treatment ends. Everyone cheers. But once the hugs are over, you're probably left with side effects, fatigue, and the haunting thoughts like, what do I do now? Is the cancer really gone? Now what do I do to keep it from coming back? And then there's the big one. When am I supposed to feel better? This is the myth of the finish line. Survivorship doesn't always start with closure. It starts with another beginning, and it's one you probably weren't warned about. Take Sarah, a woman in her late 50s who had just finished chemotherapy. Everyone clapped. She smiled for the pictures, yet later she told me, I cried the whole way home. I felt completely abandoned. I felt more lost than ever. Sarah's story is not unique. Survivorship begins, but instead of relief, many feel incredibly disoriented. So, why does this happen? Why is this phase so hard? Let's break it down. First, let's talk about this myth of the finish line. Treatment has a clear evidence-based roadmap. Survivorship typically doesn't. While you're in treatment, you live by a calendar of scans, labs, and appointments. The oncologist calls the plays. The nurses do their care, their work, and they cheer you through, and your rehab therapist keeps you strong and moving. Even when you're exhausted, there's structure, there's predictability. Then suddenly, that scaffolding falls away, and you're supposed to just know how to live again. That gap is a primary reason why so many people feel abandoned. One of my patients with prostate cancer told me, during radiation, I had a team. Afterward, I had a calendar full of blank space. And for him, like many others, that blank space was terrifying. And yes, in this silence after the storm is when fears can echo the loudest. Now, here's something surprising and important. Research shows this transition is one of the most stressful points in the entire cancer experience, along with the diagnosis and treatment, is the after. So I believe this stress point catches people off guard. They don't see it coming. Large national survivorship studies show within the first 5 years after treatment, about 15% of survivors report depression, 15% report anxiety, and 10% report thoughts of death. Survivors of all ages and all genders describe this as an emotional crash, a letdown effect, a sense of being abandoned when patients step out from underneath the umbrella of their medical team. Younger survivors are especially vulnerable, not just because of this letdown thing, but because cancer collides with critical life stages: careers, relationships, raising children, finances, even fertility. These disruptions can intensify the stress of survivorship. Maria, a cancer survivor in her 30s, once told me, "I thought finishing radiation would be my victory lap. Instead, I felt lonelier than ever. That loneliness was amplified because everyone around me thought I should be celebrating. Everyone was saying, 'Congratulations, you're done.' I wasn't celebrating. I was processing grief, trauma, fear, and physical pain. And quite honestly, I really missed many of my physicians, nurses, and therapists." So if you feel exhausted or unsteady or anxious after treatment, that is not abnormal, and it's not just you. You are living the unspoken reality that millions quietly endure. Now let's talk about the silent strain, the things that continue after treatment that people don't typically feel prepared for. Up to 70% of survivors experience ongoing fatigue after treatment ends. These are called long-term side effects that start during treatment but continue even after the treatment is over. So, symptoms like cognitive fog, aka cancer brain, officially called cancer-related cognitive impairment. Pain, weakness, anxiety, all of these affect work, relationships, and self-confidence. Anxiety about recurrence can spike at every twinge and every scan. Financial strain adds stress, whether it's medical debt, job disruption, or loss of insurance. Relationships often shift. Roles at home change. Some friendships evolve. Some friendships dissolve. Survivorship is not just medical, it's life. Another former patient of mine, who is a middle-aged father and husband, once said, "I feel like I beat cancer, but now I feel like I'm failing at my marriage and failing at my job." He, of course, wasn't failing. He was living the layered reality of survivorship, where health, finances, emotions, and relationships collide. And thankfully, he lost neither his job nor his marriage. But the transition from patient to survivor for him, his career, and certainly his family was tough. And here's another truth: late side effects. These are side effects that can show up months or years after your treatment ends. Now, these things certainly happen to a much smaller subset of the survivor population, yet they're out there looming. Heart problems, nerve pain, bone loss, infertility, radiation and surgery-related scar tissue, lymphedema. Survivors are often blindsided by these. Though again, many people say they weren't told about these late effects. Most people probably were. But it was most likely something that was grouped in with 1,000 different things you were told at the end of treatment when your poor brain was functioning at about 25%. Now, we will spend time in the future episodes talking about both long-term and late side effects. Now, I want to pause here and interject something important from the healthcare side. Cancer care and healthcare aren't perfect. Survivorship care from the healthcare side needs a ton of shoring up for sure, and there is definitely room to grow and improve. Yet, the healthcare system isn't broken. The brilliant people who cared for you worked tirelessly and with compassion. But the main problem here is that the system was never really built or designed with survivorship in mind. It was built decades ago to treat cancer, to get people to stop dying. It was not originally built to support the decades of life that can follow. Survivorship as a field is young. We are still building it. That's why these gaps feel so wide. And that's why so many survivors feel they were handed no map. Still, there are places where the system is growing. Survivorship care plans are now recommended. Some cancer centers have dedicated survivorship clinics. More research is being done on late effects, emotional health, and return to work. I've helped design survivorship programs myself, and I've seen the difference they make. But it's not consistent. Many survivors never receive a survivorship care plan. Many primary care physicians still don't yet have the training and don't feel confident managing cancer's long-term effects. And disparities in age, race, income, and geography widen these gaps. So, what do we do? Well, we start by acknowledging reality. Survivorship is not a finish line. It is a phase with challenges, with grief, and with opportunities to rebuild. And like treatment, it deserves structure, support, and recognition. And here's the good news. With information, validation, and community, people can learn to live forward. Survivorship is not about moving on. It's about moving forward with awareness, with tools, with support, and with belonging. So then what are some things that can help? Well, here are a few ideas. Survivorship care plans. Ask your provider for one if you never received one. Journaling, because writing helps make sense of these feelings and symptoms. This is why our podcasts typically end with reflection prompts. Physical therapy. Yes, even after treatments, months or years later, can be done to rebuild strength, manage pain, and improve function. Counseling, to process trauma and reduce anxiety. Support groups, whether in person or virtual, to normalize your experience with people who have walked a similar disorienting path. And primary care, reconnecting with your primary or family physician who can coordinate care long after oncology ends. James, a colon cancer survivor, once told me, "When I realized I could ask for a survivorship plan, everything shifted. I finally felt like there was a map, even if I had to draw it myself." And that's the power of asking questions, of advocating for yourself, and knowing you're allowed to need and want more. I will repeat, when it comes to your health and recovery, you are allowed to want and need more. Before we close, here are your reflection prompts. Again, these are not homework. They are invitations to pause, to ask yourself questions, and then to listen to yourself. Prompt 1. Did you feel this finish line myth? If so, when did it hit you? What emotions did you feel? Prompt 2. Where do you feel the most supported, and where do you feel are the biggest gaps? And prompt number 3. What's one question you wish your provider would ask you now? Again, there are no right or wrong answers, only your answers. And if you'd love to share them in the comments, I know that I and everyone else would love to see them also. So please do. And if today's conversation gave you words to what you've been feeling, chances are someone else in your life needs to hear it too. Please share this episode with them. Not as a promotion, but because we learn best when we learn with each other. Coming up in episode 3 of the After Cancer podcast, when life after treatment doesn't look the way you imagined, it's very easy to start comparing your cancer story to someone else's. And those comparisons can quietly shape how we judge our own experience. So, in the next episode, we're going to talk about something many survivors experience, but rarely say out loud: cancer comparing. Also, before I would go, I'd love to send my shout out to ABCD after breast cancer diagnosis. ABCD provides free personalized emotional support to anyone impacted by a breast cancer, anywhere, any stage. As a complement to medical care, ABCD matches individuals with a trained volunteer mentor who shares a similar lived experience, offering compassionate one-to-one connection based on diagnosis, treatment, age, and lifestyle. With a fully virtual platform, ABCD helps people worldwide, ensuring no one faces breast cancer alone. You can learn more at abcdbreastcancersupport.org or by calling them at 1-800-977-4121. You'll also find this information in the show notes. I'm oncology physical therapist, Dr. Leslie Welke. Thank you for joining me. Again, you'll find resources and the link to get onto our email list to have these episodes emailed directly to you in the show notes. Exercise like your life depends on it, because it does. And remember, if you are struggling with survivorship, it doesn't mean you're weak or failing, and you are not alone. Please reach out to someone on your team and tell them what you need. Thanks again for joining me. Until next time, peace out. Let's talk again soon.